Hey, this is Wes McDermott. Welcome to the second video in Chapter 1. This is overview of a Unity project. So here we're going to take a high-level look at what a Unity project is, and we're also going to take a look at what packages are within Unity. Okay, so what we're going to do here is just kind of a casual little kind of like a whiteboard session here. And we're just going to talk a little bit about a Unity project. So let's imagine for a second that we have like this box. All right, and this is like a sandbox, where we're going to create our entire Unity project. And this is going to be the Unity editor. We're talking about our entire Unity environment, the application itself and our project and everything we're going to do is going to be inside this little Unity box here, our sandbox. And what we're going to do is first we're going to think about where our game asset's going to come from. And they can come from several different areas. So first off, let's take a look at, look here, we got this, we'll start with an orange color here, and we'll think about, way off here and left here, we'll think about our 3D assets. Okay, so these guys are going to be like, if you think about your 3D assets, these are going to be our environment, characters, animation, all those type of things, vehicles, props, whatever you build in your 3D program. And once you have all those 3D assets, what we're going to do is we're going to plug those guys right into our sandbox here. And so these assets are going to feed right into our Unity project. And what you're going to do is you're going to export out from your 3D application into Unity. And Unity actually makes this very easy. So Unity supports all the major 3D applications. You've got Max, Maya, Softimage, Blender, you've got Cinema 4D, Lightwave, you name it, Unity's going to work with it. And a lot of times, and the way I kind of look at this is like the main bridge between your 3D asset and the Unity sandbox here is going to be the FBX format. This is what I consider to be, the best method to go. What you can do is you can actually, from your 3D application, Unity supports, 3D application file formats natively. So, for instance, let's say you're using Blender, you can actually just save the .blend file right here into Unity, and Unity will do basically create the FBX file that it needs to bring your asset in. That same thing works with Maya, Max, anybody. Unity also will import in other formats such as Collada and OBJ, things like that. But for the most part, the way I kind of look at it and what I use in my pipeline mainly is FBX. So think about, you've got your 3D assets here. Those guys are going to come forth or be exported from your 3D application via FBX format, and those guys are going to plug right here into your Unity project. So you've got all these 3D assets coming down the pipeline right into your Unity project. Then another thing that we can think about, and here we'll choose like this blue color, is going to be images. So we'll just think about our images. Now, where are those going to come from? Well, they're going to come from maybe Photoshop. Photoshop's very popular. There's also, any other kind of photo editing or image manipulation program you can think of. But these are going to be like either like think of things like images, textures for our 3D model, texture sheets for our UI, maybe fonts, things like that. So here we can even put fonts in here, texture atlases. So we'll say atlas, things like that. And all these type of things are going to be created again in like maybe another program like such as Photoshop or something like that. And then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to export these guys out, and we're going to save those, and we're going to plug those directly into our Unity project here. So we're going to save those guys right into the project file. And again, Unity supports an array of formats. So think, PNG, PSD, all that kind of stuff. So anything you can think of, that's not an issue. And one of the things that you can really think about that's cool is Unity can then export. So let's just think about Photoshop, for example. So say we have this PSD file here. And say we save this guy out at like a 2048 resolution, okay? And so we're going to do different builds. Like maybe we're going to make a game for mobile, and we're going to make a game for desktop. So we got two different platforms there. But what you can do with Unity is you can just export out like the PSD file or a high resolution PNG file or something like that. And you'll bring that here right into Unity. And in the texture import settings, what you can do is you can change the resolution. So you could say, well, for certain, maybe for mobile, I want it to be, a 512 texture. Maybe for desktop, I want it to be 1024, but maybe if it's a high resolution game or whatever for desktop, it's on a really nice system, I might go ahead and use the native 2048. So Unity could work within itself through the texture importer. It can take one file and use all these different formats here and different compressions, all that within the Unity environment. So again, you've got your 3D assets that you're going to bring in, you've got your images, and things like that that you'll bring in. Another thing to think about is what you do once you're actually inside of Unity. So what we'll do for this guy is maybe we'll pick something like let's just do like maybe like this yellow here. So now we're thinking about working directly inside of Unity. And inside Unity, once we have all these assets, what we're going to do is we're going to build a scene out of them. So your game or your project's going to represent a scene. So within your scene, you're going to do things like you're going to add maybe some lighting. So we're going to bring some lighting into our scene. We're going to have our camera. We're going to set up a camera that's going to film or basically record our scene. We're going to create some scripts. So you're going to use scripting here. And you're going to write some code that's going to basically make our game interactive, and you're going to apply that to our game objects that we create within our scene. You're also going to add different components and things like that. So maybe you could use, physics, different lighting, different types of simulations and things like that, audio. So, you might bring in audio, things like that. And you're going to also assemble all this stuff into a scene file. So all of this stuff is going to happen within Unity. And then once you've actually created your project and your game is working and you're finished, what you're then going to do is export that guy out. So what we'll think about in terms of export is now that everything's assembled, we're going to then pipe this stuff out of Unity. So we might say, let's pipe this guy out into a couple different formats. So we might say, okay, well, we just created this game, this one project, and we can actually do a multi-platform export here. So we could say like, okay, well, this game is going to run on mobile. So it may also run on the web. So there might be a web version. It may do desktop, and so on. You can also do consoles if you want to, depending on what type of licenses you purchase. But the idea is that you're basically going to go through and you're going to create 3D assets. You're going to bring those guys in. You're going to have images. You're going to bring those guys in. I mentioned audio up here, so you also may have some audio support that gets created. You're going to bring that stuff in. So you're going to have all these different types of assets. You're going to export those guys out, bring them into your Unity project. You're going to assemble your scene here. You're going to build your level inside Unity's 3D viewports. You're going to add lighting. You're going to add cameras. You're going to write scripts. You're going to maybe add physics and different components and things like that. You're going to assemble all this stuff together, and then once you're done and everything's working, you're then going to export all this stuff out to different platforms. Like you may say, like I said, you could target mobile, web, desktop, and so on. And so that basically wraps up the basic understanding of how Unity works from a project standpoint. So here we are inside of the Unity editor. So this is the actual application. We're not going to really get into what all these windows are and all this UI stuff yet, but what we are going to talk about just briefly is this project window. So in the portion just before this, we had that whiteboard session where we talked just a little bit about how a Unity project is assembled. So now what I want to show you is how this actually looks like in the actual Unity editor or project itself. So when you create a new project here. So we have this project tab. When you create a new project, you're going to see that Unity utilizes what's called an asset folder. So inside this asset folder is everything that makes up a Unity project. So let's just take a look at this Angry Bots. Now this is a demo that comes with Unity. So if when you get Unity, if you get the free version or even the paid version, you can take a look at this demo scene that it comes with, and it kind of helps you to kind of just pick through everything and see how everything's put together. And so we've got our assets folder here, and inside you can see that we've got a bunch of folders. And so as we talked about previously, we said that we have a scene. So if you take a look at this Angry Bots asset here, so again, here's an asset. This is the scene file. So if we kind of look just briefly, this is like our 3D view I was just talking about. Here's all these 3D objects and assets, lights, and all this kind of stuff. And all this stuff's assembled here inside this hierarchy. Cameras, lights, scripts, components, all this kind of stuff. And again, don't worry about it right now. We'll talk more about what all that stuff means a little bit later. But you can see that all that stuff's assembled into a scene, as we had talked about previously. We also have things like objects. So let's go over here to this objects folder. Inside the objects folder, we have a couple more folders. So let's look at some enemies. So here is here's a 3D object. So if we look over here, you can see that here's a 3D object called the MineBot. And so this was created in a 3D application. You can see that it's got some texture applied to it. It's got a material. You can see some reflection and some shine and things like that. So this is an asset that was originally created in a 3D program, and then it's assembled or saved out, brought into Unity, and then used as an asset here in our 3D scene. We also have materials. So here's a bunch of different materials that are created inside of Unity. So again, some more assets. Let's take a look at some textures. So here you can see here's some texture sheets. This looks like this is a sheet for the UI stuff. Here is a crate texture sheet. So this is probably created inside of maybe Photoshop or some image editing application. I had also talked before about the texture import. So here's an inspector, and you can see that it tells you, well, here's a texture type. We can take a look at some max size formats. So remember, I told you before that we could actually take a texture and change its size based off what platform we might be running on, and then we've got some different formats. We can compress it. So in the example of what I have selected here, you can see that this texture sheet's running at 256 by 256, and it's using an RGBA compressed DXT5 texture, and then it also tells you 85.4 kilobytes of texture memory this might take up. Here's some scripts. So you can see here these are a bunch of JavaScripts, and you can see over here in the import inspector, gives you kind of a brief overview of what that script actually may look like. But here's a couple of scripts. Looks like they're written here in JavaScript syntax. You can work with JavaScript or C# within Unity. There's also a third language called Boo. I honestly don't even know what that is, but I mainly use C#, but JavaScript's another one that you can use. Both of them are really simple to use here inside of Unity. We also have some animations. So these are little take files, FBX take files, and you can see that, this will be, again, something that we'll talk about later on, but these are little take file animations that we can import in. And then finally, like I told you before, here's some fonts. So here's some fonts that was created and imported in, so we can use those as GUI type elements. Okay, so one last thing we want to talk about while we're still in this overview of the project phase is we want to talk about packages. So a package is just a collection of assets, and Unity uses them pretty extensively. And it allows you to share assets between projects, also allows you to share assets between artists. Packages are used completely with the Unity asset store. So let's take a look at how this would work. So by default, if we're here in our project window, if we're in our assets folder, we can just right click on this guy, and you can see that in the context menu that comes up, we have the ability to import a package or export a package. So if we go to import package, you can see that there's quite a few of these built-in packages. Now right around Toon Shading, we're getting cut off, but what you would see is Toon Shading, Tree Creator, Water Basic, and Water Pro. And so let's just take a look at the standard assets here. So let's just say that we want to import standard assets. So I'm just going to go ahead and just left click on this guy, and you can see that the importing package window comes up. And what this is, let me just expand this as much as I can here so it doesn't get cut off. We've got the top level here is our standard assets mobile, and we can use this window. We can just click these check boxes here, and that'll uncheck, so nothing's going to be imported. If we check the highest level, everything's going to be imported. And so, what's actually going to get imported? Well, several things. First thing you can see here is that we have under the standard assets, this folder here, we've got a couple Unity scene files. So here's a couple scene files that are going to get imported into our scene. We've got a couple materials. Right here is a bunch of prefab type elements, which we'll discuss here in just a bit. Finally, if we kind of scroll down here, you can see that a bunch of scripts, so a bunch of JavaScript files are going to get imported into our project. And then finally here we've got standard asset shaders, so a bunch of different types of shaders are going to get imported. And then we also have some textures here that look like they're probably going to be used with these elements. And so in this standard assets, what you really have, if we take a look at these scenes, they're basically control setups. So we've got, pre-made control setups for first person, third person controllers, camera relative setup, all that kind of stuff. So we have all these things that are going to come into our project and going to be just these ready-made drag and drop type things that we can use. And we'll talk about what these are. These are basically prefabs, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. But you can see that the package itself is just a collection of these reusable assets. So let's just go ahead and say import. It's going to import all this stuff in for us. And now all this stuff has been added here to our scene. And if we come over here and take a look at probably our scenes, let's see. Here we go. Let's just come down to the standard assets directory. So we'll select this guy, and you can see that we've got a couple folders: control setups, materials, prefab, scripts, all that stuff I was telling you about. And if we double click to go into the controls, now here's our control scene. So let's just go into this first person setup. So I'm just going to double click to load this scene. And you can see that right here into our scene, what that loaded was a scene. And we have some type of element here. Let's just select it and focus in on it. Looks like we have some type of capsule looking element with a camera. In the case of this guy, this is actually a setup for first person control. So what this was a reusable asset that was created to allow you to quickly drag and drop a first person controlling camera scene player into your scene so that you don't have to recreate this element yourself. So if you want to create a game that's first person controls, it's already here. Open up the scene and you're ready to go. So we've got this little element guy here. I'm just going to click on this hierarchy tab. We haven't talked about this yet, so don't worry if you don't have any idea what this is, but we've got this first person controller thing, this element that's come in, and it's got a couple things that go with it: a left touchpad object, right touchpad object. Again, we'll talk about all that here in just a moment. But the thing that's really interesting is that you can reuse these elements. So let's just say that you created a game and you have a very specific type of control setup, or maybe some type of really cool widget that your game does, or some type of maybe it's exploding particle effect or something, and it's something that you want to basically store into a library. Well, what you could do is you could go through and you could say, okay, well, I like everything that's in this folder here. So let's just say we select this folder, and then I can right click on this guy and I can say export package. And when this comes up, you get this export package window, and you can see that everything is checked here, all this stuff, because I have this include dependencies checked. So let's just say this is all the scripts, there's scenes, there's materials, there's these prefab things, there's shaders, there's textures, there's all this really cool stuff that makes up what that element is. And I could export this into a file that's has the extension of .unity package. And then I could give that to another person and say, hey, here's this this cool element that I made. Feel free to use this in your game. Or it could be something that I use often throughout several of my games, and I could say, oh, I've got starting a new project. Let me just import in my default package. And I use this a lot. Like I will create a default package. It's kind of like my starter package. So if I'm going to create a new project, there's a lot of these different types of scripts and materials and object things that I've collected over the years, and things that I might use often. And I'll just set up my project and I'll import in this package, my starter package, and it's got everything I need and I'm ready to go. So that's another way that Unity keeps things so rapid in development. And then also if you go over to the Unity Asset Store, so if I come up here to the top to Window here and I go to Asset Store, that's going to launch the Unity Asset Store. And what this is a really cool repository of excellent tools. I mean, there's so much stuff in here that you could use. For instance, let's look at this thing right here, this NGUI Next Gen UI. This is a fantastic tool and something that I use often. And so this was something that I purchased to help me create all my UI. So it's like a UI tool. And you can see that once you actually purchase this, and there would be an option here that you can come in and you can update and import, or in your case if you bought it, it would say download and import or download only. But if you go ahead and import this guy, and let's see if I can come up over to click this window here. So for instance, here's Asset Store Tool. Here's a character controller, so I could import this guy in. Look at this. Here's one that I made, but it's a little distance tool for measuring scenes. Here's finger gestures, which is really good for swipes and things like that. But anyways, once you actually go and you download one of these elements, all it is just it's a Unity package. It's a scene that another artist or team has created that basically just helps you create tools a lot faster, create your game a lot faster in Unity. And the Asset Store is a huge help when you're coming to create your games. So that's basically the ins and outs of a package. Again, it's just reusable elements that you can share assets to other artists and throughout your projects. Okay, so that's going to wrap up this video. In the next video, we're going to take a look at what a game object is, as well as prefabs and components.